Hi, it's Mark back with another Photoshop tutorial, and today it's a bit of a mixed bag really. We could be looking at fill, opacity, luminance, colour. Let me explain. I was playing with this image of mine, and I was just lowering the opacity on the black and white layer to find a nicely, slightly desaturated look. And I remembered that someone once asked me what the difference was between opacity and fill. I mean, as you can see here, they both seem to do exactly the same thing, blending these two layers together. So that's one of the things we're going to be looking at today. It also dawned on me that another one that some people get a little bit confused on when working with the brushes is the opacity and the flow settings. Which would you use over the other, and in what circumstances? Is there an ideal way to use them? Is there not? Sticking with a similar theme, blending layers. When would you use luminosity versus colour? They're not all often used, these two, but they are very useful, especially when you're doing contrast type adjustments, curves, layers, and so on. We'll come to those though. But speaking of curves, and I didn't realise I was linking to that, we're also going to be looking at levels and curves. What are the differences? They seem very similar in what they do. So let's have a look at that as well. So let's play the little music, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, welcome back. The first of the topics we're going to look at is opacity versus fill. So let's jump back to our dolphin. I'll just undo a previous edit I'd done. I'll just describe what I'm actually doing here. So Command Z. So essentially, I had these two layers. The first one was the original composites I put together, but it was a little bit blurred. The stock photo of the iPod, a bit blurred. So I created it using one of the paint effect filters. I created a more glossy oil effect one, and that sharpened things up. And what I was trying to achieve is to get a desaturated, semi-desaturated look to the overall picture. So I did that by firstly desaturating this. Now I know there are adjustment layers we can use for these. For example, we could get the hue and saturation adjustment layer, and we could take the saturation down like that, and I could exactly achieve what I want by doing this and getting it to a slightly desaturated. But I didn't want to do that because I wanted to show you this other technique. And as with anything in Photoshop, there are loads of ways to achieve the same result. So anyway, having got highlighted this particular layer, Command Shift and U on a Mac, or Control Shift and U on a PC desaturates it. And I was then looking to just bring the opacity down to find a nicely desaturated blend between the two. And around about 59 was what I was after, I think. That looks okay to me. But just to get to the crux of this, opacity versus fill, opacity 100, the top layer totally takes over. Opacity 0, it might as well not be there. Fill at 100, it takes over. Fill at 0, it might as well not be there. They're doing exactly the same job. So what is, in fact, the difference? Well, the difference is that opacity and fill will both take them away and make all pixels become more transparent and then not visible. But fill will preserve any layer style changes, layers effects that you've added. So let me demonstrate that by adding a new layer. T for my text tool. And what I'll just write, well, I'll write dolphins. Okay, I'm just going to change the font on that because I want something a bit more blocky. I'll just use that one. Make it a little bit bigger. And enter. Right, so I've got a layer where I can take the opacity down. I can take the fill down. No surprises, it's exactly what we were doing before. And this time I'm going to add a layer style to it. So let's do one, I don't know, anything we'll do. Let's add a stroke. So a stroke of about 2 pixels. And now let's take down the opacity. It all disappears. Let's take down the fill, and the stroke remains. Now then, if I select my move tool, I can actually drag and put this elsewhere, and the rest of it comes through. So this could prove useful, not necessarily with blocky words saying dolphins, but what if that was our name? So now we've got the makings of possibly a watermark with the right font, and it's not that intrusive. It wouldn't obviously be that big. Let's try another effect. Take the fill back up. Let's go double click on there and add in, I don't know, a bevel. And let's get rid of the stroke. And once more, let's take the fill out. And now it looks a little bit more like glass, perhaps. But as you can see, it has the same effect. It is just the layer style that has been preserved. And then possibly this time, use opacity to take that down. And I think you've got the semblance of an easy way to do a watermark. And it needn't be text. It could have been a little logo. It could be something else that you've got on that layer that you then want to apply the layer styles to. So that's the first one. Opacity versus fill. Both do exactly the same thing, except fill preserves changes you make in the layer styles. Let's close this off, shut my dolphin down, and go on to something else. Now then, opacity versus flow. They're both their settings in the brush tool. I'll press B for my brush tool, and I'll press D for my default colors. Even though it was already set to black and white, it's a bit of an automatic thing I do. So if I put a new layer on here, stick one at the top there, and I'm going to fill it with white. So Shift and Backspace brings up my fill, and from there are different ways to do this as well. Those on Photoshop. I chose white. I happened to choose white last time, so there you go. That gives us a new white layer to play with. B again for my brush tool. Okay, so we've got soft brush, and we've got opacity and flow at 100%. I'm going to keep this quick because it's quite intuitive, but if I now just brush, there you go, fully loaded. Now let's take our opacity down to about 10% or something. Incidentally, how I did that, when you float over the word opacity and float over the word flow, you see the cursor changes to a hand with two little arrows, one to the left and right. In doing that and holding them down, you can just go back and forward. You don't have to be on the tool. And as you can see, I can change it that way. I tend to do that. I got used to doing that when I was working with my tablet and pen. But of course, you can actually just type in the number. So for while I've got my brush tool, if I type in 20, it immediately puts it at 20. If I type in 40, it puts it to 40. So you can just type straight in and it'll set that way. Did I mention you can do the drop down and slide? Or indeed you can put it actually on there and actually type in at the keyboard directly. So that's a few different ways you can just get to change the opacity. Anyhow, we're at 10%. Let's draw a line, shall we? So I draw a line. See, it's kind of faint. And no matter how many times I go back and forward, it does not get any darker. That's because no matter how much brushwork we are doing in that single brush stroke, we are just letting out black ink that has been lowered in its opacity to 10, and it won't get any darker. When it will get darker is if I now do another brush stroke, and that brush stroke overlaps the first one. So now it's not layers, we're on one layer, but in fact we have layered that set of ink on top of it. So what happens if I do a third brush stroke, and then a fourth, and a fifth? You can see we're slowly building up bit by bit. So the advantages of this, well, you have to learn to be patient. It gives you more of control, I think, if you just wanted that. You really did just want a basic lowered opacity as a blanket type paint onto something. It's fairly accurate. It's going to give you a very, very uniform paint. But I can't really think of many other circumstances I use that, to be honest. I generally have my opacity at full and have my flow low. So we'll go to 10%. Can I do the same trick with flow? If I type in 20 at the keyboard? No, 20 at the keyboard is actually reset opacity. So how do I do the same trick for flow? Well, you just add a shift. So if I go shift 20, it puts it in. Shift 10, puts it in. So there's different ways you can address setting them. Okay, we're still on our brush tool, we're still on a black, so let's now do 10% flow. Now, here you see, when I'm going back and forth in the same place, we're getting progressively darker. And that's right, because the ink coming out is black. We're just making it come out at a slower rate. So what's the real advantage of flow is that I can actually get a better shading in the one brush stroke. I can get a lot more control over how I decide to shade things, which for me is much better. And to be fair, when I'm doing my digital artwork and using brushes where I'm applying paint, I usually have it even lower. So essentially, they are the differences. So let's crack on to another one, shall we? So luminosity and colour blend modes are used quite a lot in the likes of colour grading, dodging and burning, and a lot with curves. And this is how they work. So here's a picture I have of down North Shields, looking over towards South Shields, and I want to bring a bit more contrast into this particular picture. So I might stick on a curves adjustment layer and do our traditional, and I do exaggerate when I do these because I think on screen it just shows it a little bit better for you. We'll stick on a bit of a curve. Bit of curve there, off and on. But if you look at what that's actually doing, that is changing the saturations and the colours here a little bit as a result of that. But I don't want it to do that. So I'm going to change the blend layer to luminosity. And when I hit luminosity, what that says is do not change colour. That's what luminosity should be translated to. Oh, I'm not going to change colour. I will go nowhere near colour. I am just going to look at the brightness, the luminosity values. And so if we switch that off and on, you can see we actually are not changing the colours here. We are actually changing the luminosity. It's particularly noted over here in the sunset. So if I put it back to normal and switch it off and on, you can see that that is getting far more saturated. It's actually changing the colour of that yellow. So what about colour then? Let's put a gradient map on this. Bit of potluck as to what gradient map was last used. This one's popped up. Let's make a change of this. So what is a gradient map? Well, the gradient map here will put between two colours. You can see the default that popped up here was the foreground colour to background colour, which over here happened to be white to black. So all the real bright parts that we had are actually coming up black at the moment, and all the real dark parts we had are coming up white, purely because it was going foreground to background based on this palette over here. But essentially, these are your darks here and your lights there. So let's do something about that. Shall we double click on there, change this colour, and let's put a bit of a dark purple into the into those shadowy areas. Okay, and click on this one to go to the other side, and let's bring us back to a bit more amber in there to the light side. Okay, now and click OK. Doesn't really matter what colours I'm picking, but there we go. Now that looks awful, but bear with me. If we go down now and apply a colour layer, if you notice what's happened, it's not changed. It has not changed the luminosity at all. It's just changed the colour. If I switch that off and on, and you concentrate on somewhere like here, or what's in the window, somewhere where it's really quite obviously luminant or bright. Don't think luminant's a word, but there we go. It is now. Switch it off and on. Oh, you can see that we are just changing the colour. Now, I would never put anything on as aggressive as that. I would lower the opacity somewhat, because it is a subtle thing, applying colour grading. I don't think that's improved my picture, but it hasn't spoiled it. But what it has shown is how, I guess, how to put a basic gradient map on, how to change the two extremes of the colours. The fact as well that when you're in here, you've got some presets you can select from. Some lovely pinks there, and so on. We've learned that, and we've learned that we shouldn't have it on full opacity. You should bring it down instantly. Opacity and Fill do the same job on this particular type of layer. And yeah, keep it subtle and bring it down. But there you go. That's colour, which is saying not touching luminosity. I'm just going to let these colours come through. And this one is luminosity blend mode, which says I ain't going to touch the colours at all. Let's do another one. And so finally for this one, the difference between levels and curves. So here's a picture taken on a yomp from Bowlam Lake in Northumberland up to Shafto Crag, and this is what we're going to be using. And as is usually the case, I'm not interested in what the end result of my particular picture is here, because I'm not talking about colour grading a picture or actually doing specifics. I just want to demonstrate some of the tools, and I'll probably have them slightly exaggerated just so it's more easy to see the effect on your screen. Right, so we said levels and curves, so let's add a curves adjustment layer, and let's add a levels adjustment layer. There we are. And within the properties panel, this is where we're going to make the adjustments. If you can't see a properties panel, then if you go to Windows and Properties, and it'll restore the properties panel to where you last had it. Some people have it as an extra tab along here. You might have it as a pop-out menu, but mine happen to be in this particular setup. Anyway, so I tend to use levels just because it looks uncomplicated, and I use it as a quick fix for setting my black point, possibly changing and setting my white point, but not in this picture, and moving my mids, find my greys, my mid-tones. Now you can also do that with these eyedroppers. So if I was to take that one, which is my black point, mids and highlights, see, so that's totally empty, that's got something in, and that's got a little bit of white ink in, so black, mids and highs. If I take that black point and find my black point, probably in there, and you can adjust things via that. That's by the by. You can also compress the blacks using the output channel. So this is saying I don't actually want anything to the left of this slider, so I don't want to see that black, so raise everything up to the left. And that says, well, conversely, for the whites, you crush the whites on the output. So there's a few things you can do in levels, and you can do it with individual channels as well. So if we take blue, for example, and we start to bring up the black point on blue, we start to get more yellow in the picture. But then yellow is the opposite colour to blue in your colour theory. I will be doing a more comprehensive video on colour grading and some colour theory using Adobe Themes, which is a little known plugin. A little bit of a spoiler here. If we go to Windows and then we go to extensions, and you've got a thing called Adobe Colour Theme, and there's lots you can do in that to put swatches together, get various colours, get complementary colours, create your own, browse other people's, and so on. So that's one for another time. So they're the sort of things we can do in levels. What about curves? Well, we can do exactly the same thing. I'll switch that levels one off. Hang on a second. There we are. We can change our black point. We can change our white. We can change our mids by going in the middle here. We can do it on RGB. We can do it on individual colors, so that increases the blues. Come down, you start to see more yellow coming in with it being opposite of blue. Click on reset. We've got a black point, which you can sample. We've got our 50% grey, our midpoint, which you could sample, and our highlights. So basically, this does everything that the curves does. I'll just reset that. Except it's got extra features. This is useful. So this is the hand tool with an up and down arrow on it. So you bring your mouse over and you pick the area you want to sample, and you can see it moving on the graph. So whereas if I wanted to change that particular piece here, where would I actually know to go on that graph? I would never have guessed it was up there. But by using this, I don't need to worry about it. So now I can bring that particular shade down. And I can actually do that within channels. So if I'm on green and I come in and take a sample, and I can start to alter things. So this picker is what makes curves far more superior to levels. And of course, we can do our traditional S-curve. In fact, you don't have to stop there. You could actually put other curves in. I'm not looking at the screen, by the way. I'm just messing on, putting extra curves in. And that makes it superior to levels. The final thing to call out difference is if we go back levels, we had this, we said that we'd change our black point there, and we said we had output there, which we could crush the blacks and whites. Well, if we go back to curves, to get that same effect on curves, this is where we change our black point, but if you now move this, if you now move that pointer up the side, you're getting exactly the same effect. Switch curves back on, switch that off, come in, as we did there. So really, bye-bye curves. There's no real reason other than, I guess, simplicity that I can see that you'd want to use levels. That said, over curves. That said, I do throw levels in. I do tend to use it, and I think it's purely because my mind thinks I just want a simple task on this. I just want to increase the blacks, so I'll just throw levels in, and I'll do the equivalent of doing that to bring it across. Horses for courses. I think I wouldn't be surprised if levels got retired at some point. I actually don't know which came first, level or curves in Photoshop. Possibly this is just evolution, and curves became levels plus, and it was never retired. But there you go. Whichever you're more comfortable with. Personally, I think curves is the far superior tool because of the adjustment levels you can have. I didn't mean to say levels, because of the adjustments you can make to your screen, use across the histogram in multiple parts, and also because you've got this picker in the middle. And did you also know that in some of these tools you have got some presets, and it'll nearly always come up with custom, but you can actually go for generally increasing contrast. So if you were just learning and you wanted to know how to possibly do an increase in contrast, or if you wanted to make something negative, then you can actually see how they've done it in the tool. I don't particularly want that picture like that, but now I know that if I swap these down and up, that I can create a negative of the picture. And you know what? Until I actually did that right now for you, I did not know. So it's always worth having a play. In this YouTube video and anyone else's YouTube video, when they show you a feature, don't just learn that one piece. Just press pause button, go and have a play. You can always press reset. or in extreme, delete the whole thing and come back in with another one. You could always as well have more than one of the same thing and try something on one and something on the other and alternate between them so you get to see for yourself which to do. So I'll leave you with that. That's just to tell you to keep inquisitive and press and push every slider. You're not going to break anything. Your PC or Mac is not going to blow up. So until the next time, have fun, and I will see you later.